still here. So sorry about that. What I do is trust in God and my editor and producer and start again. Welcome to this Living Working Abroad show. What we want to discuss this time just, I'm still going to start again anyway, so forgive me for that. And as you can see, I have got a producer in my office with me for this show. And as ever, I'm the responsible person that's messed that one up. Anyway, what we can see is that living working abroad can be fraught with different issues. And if you need help and guidance, we're good at many things, not always producing a live YouTube channel, as we just discovered. You can always contact us at poetpartnership.com. So to start again, we're giving you a view. I've got my air conditioning working today because it's a full-on Mediterranean summer, and give you a brighter perspective on the miserable things that are going on in the world today, with the political and legal and war strife that's going on around the world. And we want to try and look at ways that you can plan ahead for your family, your business, and your property to be living and working abroad more tax efficiently. Um, Today we're going to centre on Europe, but around the world as well, for locations where we're going to focus down on state healthcare and state benefits, because the state can be a positive and a negative, or it can be an insurance scheme, and we just want to look at that and put that in perspective for us. So let's start again with what's going on in the world today. We said before, in democracies, you've got swings, uh, everything swings to the centre. So when you get an extremist government in place, whether it's a right-wing autocrat, a tyrant, or a left-wing communist bureaucracy, or just a stale old democracy that keeps changing its government every 5 years, but still churning out the same cabal of useless politicians that maintain the status quo by the civil service that's been running the country, really, while the politicians get paid a lot of money to do the votes. Um, Everything swings back to the centre. And this week is the 4th of July. It's the middle of the year. So if you're living in a country with an annual calendar tax year, then the 4th of July, if you've lived in the country to the 4th of July from the 1st of January, you're tax resident for that year. So that means you'll have a tax return obligation in countries like Spain and Portugal, and many other countries around the world. Um, and that's a good step to see. Some of the negatives of that are that these countries are introducing solidarity taxes, wealth taxes on your worldwide income, or higher rates of flat rate income. So the low tax destinations aren't necessarily what they are in the world. Plus, you've got better exchange of information, so that you can't discreetly rent a house out on Airbnb abroad in Spain or Portugal and not pay tax. Apart from being tax evasion, um, they won't let you do it anymore, because your property agent is a tax agent, so he has to report that information, as do your banks and your investment companies, your pension companies. So let's get it right. Let's pay the right amount of tax to declare the right information when we're living and working abroad. What we see as well a year down the line into this government, is it's beginning to swing back to the centre. It's often been my perception that this is a far left government um, in the UK, elected by default, by accident, by doing nothing, because the previous 25 years of governments were so appalling. And they've actually kept up their ways. And yes, they will criticise people for unrest and for complaining about uh, girls being murdered while they're at a dance school, or people being arrested for uh, what they say, thinking that they've got freedom of speech. So there can be issues like that coming up. But on the other side of the coin, um, you've got the failures of the government, which are beginning to come home to us, beginning to move the government away from its original position. They introduced £40 billion of new taxes in the UK in the autumn and Halloween budget at the end of 24, but then they missed out at the start of the UK tax year with the spring budget to implement any new changes. And now we see they've had a spending review, which was supposed to bring about 5 billion of public spending cuts, was actually been changed to 2.5 billion, and some of those deferred for another couple of years. The point being is that the public spending in the UK is 300 billion, and that 300 that the government and the civil service spend is taxpayers' money. If they haven't got enough money to pay their bills, the government borrow it on the economic market. So if the world economy thinks that the UK government is doing okay, that it's taxing enough, that it's got enough growth, then they'll lend them money. But whatever they do lend them, it's got to be paid back, and it's got to be paid back by interest. And the money that they use is the taxpayers' money. So what we can see is that the British level of borrowing to fund public spending is going up and up and up, and it's at record highs, and therefore the likelihood of the UK getting in a very severe uh, financial twist and economic doom and gloom in the next few years, it becomes more and more likely depending on where things go. Uh, if you can't cut your spending, then you have to raise your taxes. So now, having raised 40 million in the first budget, deferred any decisions in the second, we're now looking forward to 25, 26, when we already know the inheritance tax is going up on pension funds, so that 40% of your pension fund is going to be taxed before it gets to your family when you die, to the detriment of your wife and children. But also, there's a review on inheritance tax over the year. So, will they consolidate or increase capital gains tax again? They increased capital gains tax by 80% in the Halloween budget of 2024. Will that go up some more, or will it be more broadly spread? Will they change some of the incomes that you can have taxed in the UK, and fix those incomes and capital into the UK, even if you're living and working abroad? These are the issues that concern people and why people want to relocate abroad. And if you need help and advice for your business, your family, or your property, living and working abroad, you can contact us at proactpartnership.com. It's not just the UK that's changing and got some unrest as well, though. Consider about the EU. Now, there's an increasing number of EU countries very concerned about um, the migrant flows. Now, in the UK, you've got an issue with the migrants between France and the UK, for whatever reason. That's been allowed to go on for years and years and years for no good reason. If those asylum seekers are in France, that's where they should claim asylum seekers. And if they illegally are allowed to leave France, then Britain arguably could force them and stop them doing that and return them to France. That would potentially cause a conflict between France and the UK. But that is not dealt with, and hasn't been dealt with by any British government for over 25 years. The problem in the EU is that they've got land borders outside the EU. So you've got land borders to parts of Russia, Moldova, Belarus, and Turkey on Eastern Europe, and this is allowing people to break into it legally into Europe. Now, if you're in a country illegally and you have got a residency permit, then obviously you're breaking the law, and if you get caught, then the legal process will take hold. If you claim asylum seeking as asylum seeker, that the law on asylum means you're fleeing some sort of conflict or oppression or hardship. So if you claim that under international law, the government is obliged to follow that protocol and give you at least up to 2 years to consider your case. So countries get obliged to accept the asylum seeker once across the border. Now, within the EU, you've got open borders. So if somebody's in the EU as an asylum seeker or has a residency permit, you're free to move around the whole of the EU, no border checks. So if you've got a residence permit for France or Cyprus or Greece, you can move to any other country in the EU, technically, without a passport and without a border check. That's what the Schengen zone does, except now cracks are appearing in that. Before the Schengen zone is even completed, with the last few countries joining, hopefully in 2026 for the EU, uh, we've got reaction from some of the countries, and Poland and Germany have reintroduced border checks to check people have got a residency permit when they're crossing from one EU country into theirs. So the freedom of movement principle still exists in the EU, but now they're doing border checks, which is something they haven't done in the past. So that started in Poland, in Germany, and will it spread to the rest of the EU? We will see. Cyprus, where the ProEx European office is based, is not actually in the Schengen zone at the moment. They're joining this year, so you still have to use your passport to get in and out of uh, the the Cyprus. And if you're an EU citizen, you still need to have a resident permit, but you get that under the EU citizenship rules rather than a Schengen zone rules. So even an EU citizen, while it's the Schengen zone is in place, it's not official. So you can show them the ID card, and they may let you through, but they might ask you to see your passport as well. But if you're in Germany, in theory, you can drive through Holland, Belgium, France, Spain, and into Portugal without any border checks. Well, that's stopping now in some of those countries, and it's because of the concern about migrants and the agitation that's been caused by that, by the imbalance of that. Asylum seeking is important post-war creation to protect people fleeing the likes of the Nazis, the likes of any other tyrant that wants to persecute them. But does it apply to everybody who's an economic migrant? That's the stress that the governments need to address today. But it's interesting to see that the EU now, despite the freedom of movement principle, the countries are introducing those border checks again. Not border controls, border checks. So you're going to need to have your residency permit and your um, uh, to move around the EU, which, if you're a resident, means you need to get the passport card for the EU. If you need help and guidance, uh, getting a residency permit in the EU or the UK, or you need to convert your existing permit from paper to the modern card formats for crossing borders, you can contact us at proactpartnership.com for help and guidance. Another key point when you're passing borders is healthcare and state pensions. And the main topic for today is just to have a bit more of a broader view on that, and in terms of what is the impact for that. So when you've got the EU, you've got a set of countries which all agree to a common set of rules for their EU citizens. So anyone who's a citizen of an EU country, they've got EU citizens' rights, and they can move between those countries. They can live and work in those countries. You still need to register. If you're French going to Spain, you still need to register. If you're uh, uh, German going to Cyprus, you still need to register. That's a given. But you've got the principle, you've got the freedom of movement. The British people are no longer in the EU. Norwegians are not in the EU, so it's a different type of arrangement for them. However, there's still agreements to be made, and individual countries can give specific rulings and concessions and golden visa type of opportunities for people to join and live in those countries. So the EU offered British people and offers EU expats a freedom of movement. You still need to register, but without any objections. Outside the EU, you've got extra hurdles that you need to pass. Can you still buy property? Can you still be a tax resident? That depends. And increasingly, the headline topic is golden visas. Now, golden visas used to be a way to get a quick passport, not so much anymore these days. But if you're an expat, you live and work in a country for 5 years, you can get a permanent residency. Now, in England, they call it indefinite leave to remain. And there's certain checks that are done on that, but effectively, um, it allows you to stay indefinitely after that period. So sometimes it might be the permanent residency indefinitely to remain might be limited to say 10 years, or it might be a lifetime, as long as you keep visiting or staying in that country. All these things require tax residency as well. So if you do buy property abroad, you can do that. And the golden visa rules are about people establishing a business, a company, or a property in that jurisdiction, or maybe even just taking a capital deposit into that country to get that residency. And you could be paying, you can make that investment at 300, 200, 500, 2 million to come to the country. So there are lots of different options available to you to do that in that country. The point is that once you've got that residency permit and you want to maintain it over the first 5 year period or get the citizenship, you've got to become a tax resident as well. Now, then you want to choose the right country for tax for you. So, which is the best country? Well, that depends on lots of things. It's always got to be family first. So, where does your family suited and where do your family want to go? And once you've got that in place, what they've got that idea, you can then look at um, what is the tax efficient location for you. Um, One of the underlying factors to consider is state pensions and healthcare. Um, if a British expat goes to a country, um, then potentially can still be paid their state pension, but it might not be indexed. So if you relocate to a country which has got a social insurance agreement between the UK and your country of tax residence, then potentially if you're receiving a state pension, you'll get that index linked as well. Uh, Potentially, if you're going to live and work in another country with a reciprocal social insurance agreement, you can also, your contributions into the social insurance or the national insurance scheme in that second country contributes towards your single state pension scheme. What we've got in the UK is that because they're not in the EU, um, and EU citizens have got slightly different laws. Within the EU, you can have one state pension. So it doesn't matter which country you're working within the EU, your social insurance contributions during your lifetime go towards your state pension. And state pension can be claimed in your country of tax resident when you reach that retirement age. So if you're in Cyprus when you retire and you're a tax resident in Cyprus, as an EU citizen, you can claim uh, a state pension there under the Cyprus state rules, providing that you've got enough years contribution from all the countries that you worked in within the EU. Now that's a matter of fact for the EU. Now for the UK, that works as well because the UK have got a social insurance agreement with the EU. So you've got that reciprocal agreement arrangement in place. But what the UK has got as well, it's also got a reciprocal arrangement agreement with other countries. So if you wanted to be in Iceland, you could do that. There's smaller countries in the EU that, like Liechtenstein, which are not part of um, the EU. Um, that's got a reciprocal agreement anyway. You've got Switzerland and Norway, not in the EU, but still they're part of a European convention. So independent countries for tax, but the social insurance schemes are joined as well. Now, it's not every country in the world. So if you go to many African countries, there'll be no social insurance, healthcare reciprocal agreements in place. But there would be with Turkey, there would be with America or Canada, Israel, and some of the Caribbean islands like Barbados, Bermuda, Jamaica. Um, the Channel Islands are an independent state. It's an independent tax state. But again, the social insurance agreements are linked. So if you relocate to Isle of Man for whatever reason, uh, uh, it could be tax. The social insurance agreement is a reciprocal agreement. You've got the Philippines, you've got Mauritius, you've got New Zealand that you could go to as well, as well as South Korea. So you've got a wide range of countries that actually have got a reciprocal social insurance agreement that would allow you to be living and working abroad and still on that 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 year contract, the contributions are contributing towards your home state pension, or it's a continual agreement scheme. If you're going to a Middle East country where there's no social insurance agreement, then you need private medical cover. So it's all private. So private healthcare dominates in USA, but there is still a reciprocal agreement for the basic Medicare arrangements. But if you go to a job or you go to live and work in a country where there's no reciprocal agreement, then you need to get onto private healthcare and private medical cover. And so that's something for expats to consider. So it could be, in when you're making your decision process, that you consider a country with a reciprocal social insurance agreement, not just so that you only need one lot of contributions in your working life to get that state pension. It's also, from a UK perspective, to keep your state pension index linked. So if you're British and you go to retire in South Africa, there's no index linked pension. So you might be entitled to your pension at age 67, but it will stay at that level for your lifetime unless you relocate as a tax resident back to a country, the home country, or to the UK later on. Not to catch up, you'll still be behind, but you'll be indexed going forward. Similarly, with healthcare, not every country around the world has got state healthcare, and each healthcare system around the world is slightly different. One of the failings of the UK is that politicians are stuck in this idea that the NHS is going to be exactly as it is, and actually what it is an unwieldy bureaucracy which doesn't work very well. And uh, the bizarre thing is that Proact Office in Cyprus, there was a very basic state healthcare. Everything's always been private, but when Cyprus joined the EU, uh, potentially some reciprocal healthcare agreements came into place. They had to reinvent and recreate a whole state system that was fit for the EU and fit for the um, UK. We were privileged that our client was the consultant that the Cypriots employed to implement that healthcare system, to create a healthcare system for Cyprus. And of course, he was a British civil servant, retired from running the NHS in the UK. And what he created was an absolutely world class, top of the jaw healthcare system that works. It absolutely works. So effective, it's not this political whining about free at the point of treatment. Now, you might have to pay £5 for this prescription or £10 to see the doctor. You know, and if I'm very poor, maybe I will get some credits, but €5, €10, it's not a lot of money unless you've got no money. And I'm not making out the report, but in the UK, it doesn't matter who you are, you're not paying any money out. And therefore, when it's free, you've got the biggest queues, got the biggest waiting list, and they get organised and put in a list, and nothing ever gets done. All the service providers in Cyprus are contracted private hospitals, private doctors, private treatment clinics. So you don't have to. Yeah, sure, you have to get referred by your state doctor, your state GP to go and get the treatment, but you can go to any provider that's got it. So you don't have to queue up to the NHS hospital 50 miles down the road to see that one consultant. You go to the specialist that's available now and get it booked and get it done now. And no waiting, uh, uh, availability, uh, more and more people investing in that. It's a free market of suppliers to supply a system which is effectively free and available to all. So it's a great healthcare system. So if you're relocating overseas and healthcare is your issue, then Cyprus makes a great choice for expats. Um, if you're an EU expat or if you're British expat, then you can do that. Now, when you reach state retirement age, uh, you can get a certificate that allows you to come and transfer and retire in that any country with a reciprocal health care system and get state healthcare straight away. So that's what you can do in countries like Cyprus or within the EU. So when you reach, so if you've got a state pension, if you've got a state pension in the EU, you get a certificate that gives you a state pension in your country of tax residence. Okay, but that technically could also be done in any of the other countries around the world. If you've got a British state pension and you want to go and live in Israel, now you might not want to go and live in Israel at the moment, but there is a reciprocal agreement. So have that in mind. The second point is that it, it's if you're working abroad. So if you want to be a remote worker, if you want to go on a golden visa, now if you want to go and work in Cape Verde, you're not necessarily going to have access to the state healthcare. If you go and work in Dubai, you haven't got access to a state system. So you jolly well make sure that your employer provides you with a private medical cover for that. But if you want access to a state system, then you have to do it in a country with reciprocal agreement. Now, if you're working abroad remotely as a remote worker or as a nomad that you want, as long as you've got a tax residence somewhere, you can get an exemption form or a transfer form from the UK, even if you're working age, to transfer your healthcare for 1 or 2 or 3 years, even if you're not receiving a state pension. So every British person could come to Cyprus or any EU country to live and work as a nomad and get healthcare, state healthcare over in that country for 1 or 2 years. And that is great. Now, typically, like in Cyprus, you can do that and you can get that transfer and it does work for you and it keeps you in the healthcare system. And you can work remotely so that you're a nomad, so you're not a tax resident in the country, but you can get access to the healthcare system, but your work is being done elsewhere. Now, but conversely, if you want a system where um, you, you can be working temporarily in a country or you can move permanently to a country. Now, if you're moving permanently and you're creating a business or a company in another country, then you have to start paying social insurance locally. So again, if you move to Portugal or Spain and you get residence, you can potentially qualify for state healthcare straight away. If an expat goes and relocates legitimately to the UK, from day one they qualify for NHS. That isn't necessarily so in other countries. If you don't qualify to transfer your state healthcare into another country. With a country like Cyprus, with its um, NHS-based scheme, um, which works, you come over and you register your business as a sole trader or contractor abroad, or a company, and you stop paying social insurance here. And as soon as you pay 3 months social insurance, you qualify for state healthcare in this country. Okay, so a nomad can come and be 3 months here, 3 months there, and as long as they've got one tax residence in the EU or from the UK, they can have their healthcare in any of those countries. But if you want to go to a country where there isn't that system, then if you want a state healthcare system, you need to look at registering your company or your business in there to pay social insurance, and then you can pay um, then you get access to the healthcare. So if you're a nomad, you may not care much for that. You may want to be moving around. But if you do care and you want that access, then you have to be the tax resident in the country. So a nomad uh, in Cyprus could just pay tax only on a remitted basis. They only pay tax on the income that they bring into the country, but have the state healthcare with paying the social insurance or having the transfer from their home country. Um, but if you want to settle, create your business and pay social insurance, then you get the state healthcare either way as well. So it's not automatically on residence. You have to pay something towards it, but it gives you access and gives you that protection and that security. And wherever you are abroad, if you're paying social insurance contributions, they can contribute towards your home state pension and benefits in the long run. If you don't have any of that, um, you need to contact us at proactpartnership.com. But if you don't have any of that, there's still options for you to do. So when you leave the UK, you lose your entitlement to state healthcare and you lose your entitlement to most of the benefits that you'll get if you're a UK tax resident. So you're relocating abroad, you don't have your entitlement in the same way that you would have done in the past. So this is something to think about. But what you can do then is think about it in a different way and approach it from a different perspective. Um, the couple of things that the state's system does do in the UK is if you keep making voluntary contributions while you're abroad, you're contributing towards your state pension in the UK, and you're contributing towards a few little things like bereavement benefits and potentially some other health benefits if you've got a mini crisis coming on. So a UK expat going to live abroad can come back at any time to live in the UK and not a problem and immediately re-qualify for healthcare in the UK. But if you're living and working abroad, each country is slightly different. So some uh, with a reciprocal social insurance agreement, you get a transfer from your home country, even if you're working. Some where there is no healthcare system, no reciprocal healthcare system, you need private healthcare. Um, but whatever your decision on that is that you can still contribute towards your state pension in the UK. Now, you might not want to, but actually it can be quite cost effective to qualify for a state pension scheme the way they are at the moment, if you trust the government not to change it during your working life. So voluntary contributions are a way of keeping you in touch with the UK. So if you're going to work for 5 years in Dubai, um, your employer gives you private medical cover, great. You can make voluntary contributions back into the UK from your tax-free income in Dubai that will make sure that you've got, as soon as you get back into the UK, you've still built up that 5, 10, 20 years credit towards a state pension and bereavement benefits if anything happens to you or your family while you're living and working abroad. So there's many different options that you've got, and that you can consider that with us at Proact Partnership. Contact us at proactpartnership.com. So let me summarise. um, the different options there with state pensions and healthcare. They're both linked. If a country's got a social benefit scheme, a state healthcare scheme, um, then you can potentially, by living and working in that country, qualify for it. Each country's rules are slightly different, but in the same way that the country can have a double taxation treaty that is reciprocal, they can also have a separate reciprocal social insurance agreement. And this allows a transfer of healthcare and state pension and welfare benefits between countries. What this means is that where there's a reciprocal agreement in place, a nomad or an expat living and working abroad can work in another country and make contributions towards that can be switched towards state pension and benefits when they return home. If you're living in a country with reciprocal state benefits, you can potentially also transfer over your state healthcare straight away, even if you're not working. So if you're an investor or retired, you can transfer your state healthcare benefits over to your reciprocal benefit country. Doesn't count for UAE or Dubai or Saudi, countries like that. But for countries like the EU or some of the or the British Isles, USA, Canada, Turkey, Philippines, it does work in those countries, and you can get this reciprocal cover. Okay, so if you need to pay, um, Britain being an independent country, even if you go and work abroad for 40 years in another country and qualify for a state pension in that other country, uh, you could still contribute into the UK voluntary national insurance contributions to get your full UK state pension as well. So you can double up on your two and have two state pensions from two different countries. So that's another option if you make the contributions for enough years over the years. For more information and guidance on living and working abroad, transferring your state healthcare and state pension benefits, making sure that you and your family are covered, whether you're working remotely, you're working as a nomad, whether you're working abroad but your family are in another country. Make sure that you maximise your tax benefits and maximise the savings you can get through state healthcare schemes on the medical cover that your family have got and the insurances that they've got in any event, whatever happens to you. You know, and if you make it for a long and happy retirement, you get the benefits from them. For more information and guidance, contact us at parentpartnership.com, um, and we offer a free review to all our clients. And in a free review, we can it's a full-on consultant review, and potentially you can earn some benefits from us. And if not, you've got the advice and guidance to take with you. So we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks for joining us. Next time, my producer will do a better job on the microphone and getting me set up. And you can enjoy some time living and working abroad in the sweltering heat of the mountains of central Cyprus. Thanks a lot for listening. We'll see you again soon.